A lone driver, Lucas, was on a long, dark stretch of highway late at night. The road ahead disappeared into a black void, the only light coming from his headlights slicing through the oppressive darkness. He hadn't seen another car or sign of life for hours. When a figure appeared in the distance, standing by the roadside with a thumb raised, Lucas hesitated. Picking up hitchhikers was something he'd never considered, but the isolation gnawed at him, and a part of him craved any kind of company. As he slowed down, the hitchhiker stepped closer. He was a thin man in his late 30s, dressed in clothes that looked dated but clean. His face bore an eerie, unwavering smile, teeth unnaturally white against his pale skin. "Thanks for stopping," the man said in a soft, even tone as he climbed in. His voice sent a chill down Lucas's spine, but he shrugged it off. The hitchhiker placed a small leather bag at his feet and fastened his seatbelt. Lucas glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. The man's smile never faltered, and his hands rested unnaturally still on his knees. "Where are you headed?" Lucas asked, trying to break the uneasy silence. "Just down the road," the hitchhiker replied. His words were as vague as his expression was fixed. As they drove, Lucas tried making small talk, but the hitchhiker only gave curt answers, all while maintaining his unsettling grin. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the rhythmic beat of the tires against the asphalt. Then the strange events began. It started subtly. A flicker of the headlights that Lucas chalked up to a failing bulb. But soon, the darkness outside seemed to grow denser, swallowing the light as though the highway stretched into a void. The hitchhiker turned his head slightly, his grin widening. "Strange night," he remarked. Lucas glanced at the man, trying to gauge his tone, but his face was unreadable beyond the smile. Lucas felt his grip tighten on the steering wheel. The road ahead warped, or so it seemed. It twisted unnaturally, and Lucas had to swerve to avoid what looked like a figure standing in the middle of the highway. His heart raced, but when he looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing there. "You should keep your eyes on the road," the hitchhiker said, his grin somehow growing more unnerving. Lucas chuckled nervously, trying to mask his discomfort. "Yeah, guess I'm just tired." The hitchhiker didn't respond, but Lucas could feel his gaze. It was as if the man wasn't just looking at him, he was studying him, dissecting him with his unblinking stare. As they passed an old mile marker, Lucas caught sight of something peculiar. The same marker again, just a mile later. Then again, a mile after that. It was as though they were driving in circles, though he hadn't turned once. His phone lost signal entirely, and the GPS froze on the same stretch of road. When Lucas looked in the mirror, the hitchhiker wasn't there. The passenger seat was empty. A wave of relief swept over him until a voice, calm and steady, came from directly behind him. "You can't leave me." Lucas screamed, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. When he whipped around, the hitchhiker was back in the seat, still smiling, his hand still resting calmly on his knees. What do you want?" Lucas stammered. The hitchhiker didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to Lucas, who hesitated before taking it. The picture showed a car eerily similar to his own, parked on the same stretch of highway. Inside the car sat the hitchhiker, smiling. "This is impossible," Lucas whispered. The hitchhiker's grin stretched wider, impossibly so. "Drive." Lucas slammed the door open and bolted from the car, sprinting into the woods. The air was thick and suffocating, the darkness pressing in on him from all sides. His lungs burned as he ran, but no matter how far he went, he kept seeing flashes of the hitchhiker's smile in the shadows, grinning at him from behind the trees. Eventually, he stumbled back onto the highway, gasping for breath. His car was parked exactly where he'd left it, the driver's door open and the engine idling. He hesitated but knew he had no choice. Slowly, he got back into the car, his hands trembling as he gripped the wheel. The hitchhiker was gone. Lucas started driving, desperate to put as much distance as possible between himself and that stretch of road. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, the hitchhiker's grin was there, floating in the darkened back seat. "You'll never leave me," the voice whispered. As Lucas's screams echoed into the night, the car disappeared into the endless black void of the highway. No one ever saw Lucas, or his car, again. The Johnson family had always loved road trips. It was a tradition. Each autumn, they'd drive through new towns, exploring and experiencing the peaceful rural life. This year, their route took them to a quiet farming town named Larkspur. Nestled at the edge of a dense forest, Larkspur was quaint, a place that looked as if it had been untouched by time. The air smelled like freshly harvested wheat, and the sound of crickets filled the cool evening air. As they rolled into town, they were greeted with smiles and waves from the locals. They were immediately invited to the annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of a year's worth of prosperity. The people were warm, too warm, and they insisted on the family joining in on the festivities. Their hospitality was overwhelming, but the Johnsons, eager to experience something new, accepted. The town square was decorated with golden wheat stalks, pumpkins, and candles that flickered eerily under the autumn sky. The Harvest Festival felt like something out of a storybook, with hay bales stacked high and children running through the streets in costumes. The festival's main event was a bonfire, where the townsfolk gathered to sing old hymns and chant in unison, their faces illuminated by the orange glow of the fire. But there was something off about the whole scene. As the family wandered through the square, they noticed symbols carved into the crops, strange runes and intricate designs that looked like they belonged to an ancient civilization, not something you'd see on a normal farm. One of the children, Timmy, pointed out a carving on a nearby farmhouse door, a spiral symbol that seemed to twitch under the flickering light of the fire. That night, the family stayed in the town's only inn, a creaky old building with worn furniture and faded wallpaper. As they prepared for bed, they noticed more strange symbols, this time etched into the wooden beams. They weren't just decorative, they were purposeful, like warnings or instructions. The next day, things took a darker turn. While walking through the fields, the family found crops bent in unnatural ways, forming larger shapes and patterns that didn't seem to belong in nature. There were more symbols, carved into the side of trees and even in the very earth itself. As they explored, the family stumbled upon a barn hidden in the back of a field. The barn was larger than most, and a chilling energy surrounded it. Inside, they found walls covered in strange markings, some of them fresh, others old and faded. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, like the building itself was holding its breath. In the center of the barn lay an altar, made from what appeared to be a combination of rotting wood and hay. The altar was adorned with flowers, but the flowers were wilting and rotting as if the life had been drained from them. Suddenly, the family was not alone. A group of townsfolk emerged from the shadows, their faces grim. The head of the group, a tall man with a dark beard, introduced himself as the town's leader. He told the family that the Harvest Festival wasn't just a celebration, it was a ritual. Larkspur's prosperity was tied to an ancient pact, one that required a sacrifice. Outsiders, like the Johnsons, were chosen each year to ensure the land remained fertile and the crops bountiful. "You see," the man said, his voice low, "our town thrives because we give the earth what it demands. A new soul, fresh blood, you've been chosen." The family's blood ran cold as they realized the truth. The town had been sacrificing outsiders for generations, using their deaths to keep the crops lush and the harvests rich. The symbols they had seen, those carvings in the crops and on the houses, were marks of the ritual, a map guiding the sacrifice. And now, the Johnson family was the next offering. They tried to run, but the townsfolk were everywhere. The warm hospitality they had once felt turned into a cold, suffocating grip. The leader stepped forward, a knife gleaming in his hand. He was calm, unhurried. "The harvest is more important than anything," he said softly. "We do this for the land." As the family struggled, the children screamed, but no one heard them. The crops outside rustled in a silent wind, as if the earth itself was watching, waiting for the offering to be made. The Johnsons never made it out of Larkspur. Their bodies were never found, but every year the harvest festival continued, and each time a new family, a new group of travelers, was welcomed into the fold. The townsfolk spoke of their prosperity, but the truth was hidden in the soil. The sacrifice was what kept them thriving, what kept them alive. And every year the crops grew a little more bountiful, while the shadows in Larkspur deepened. A group of 4 friends, Rachel, Ethan, Claire, and Jake, were on a road trip through the countryside, their laughter filling the car as they shared stories of past adventures. As midnight approached, the winding road stretched endlessly ahead of them, and hunger gnawed at their stomachs. Just as they began to consider pulling over, a flickering neon sign appeared in the distance. Mabel's Diner, open 24 hours. The diner had a warm, welcoming glow. Inside, the retro decor, cozy booths, and faint smell of sizzling bacon felt like a comforting escape from the eerie darkness outside. The waitress, a cheerful woman named Mabel, greeted them with a bright smile and menus. "Y'all are lucky you found us," she said. "Not many places open this late." The food was delicious, almost unnaturally so. Rachel commented on how the apple pie tasted just like her grandmother's, a detail she hadn't shared with anyone. Ethan felt a strange déjà vu while sipping the coffee, as if he had been here before. But it wasn't until they paid the bill and walked out to their car that the unease set in. The road seemed wrong. It wasn't the same stretch they had driven earlier. After only a few minutes of driving, they saw the flickering neon sign again. Confused, they turned into the diner's parking lot, thinking they had somehow gotten turned around. But when they stepped inside, the same booth they had just left was exactly as they had left it. Crumbs, empty glasses, and all. "This is impossible," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. They tried to leave again. This time, Ethan insisted on driving in the opposite direction. Yet, no matter how far they went, the same glowing sign greeted them over and over: Mabel's Diner, open 24 hours. The third time inside, things began to change. The other patrons, who at first seemed like quiet travelers, now stared at them with hollow, unblinking eyes. A man in a booth muttered under his breath, "You shouldn't have stopped," over and over. The lights flickered. The cheerful music on the jukebox warped into a haunting, off-key melody. In the kitchen, Rachel noticed a dark stain spreading across the tiles, accompanied by a metallic smell. When she pointed it out, Mabel's smile faltered for the first time. "Kitchen's off limits," she said sharply, her eyes narrowing. As the loops continued, the diner revealed more of its sinister secrets. On their 5th visit, they saw a shadowy figure in the corner booth watching them. On their 6th, they found a diary left on their table, its pages filled with frantic scrawls describing similar experiences. The entries ended abruptly, the last sentence smeared with what looked like blood. "Don't eat the pie." Desperation set in. The group split up to search for answers. Jake ventured into the kitchen, where he found a blood-stained meat grinder and a pile of wallets, all belonging to people who had been reported missing in the area. Claire examined the jukebox and discovered a hidden compartment containing photographs of past patrons, their faces scratched out. Rachel confronted Mabel. "What is this place?" she demanded. Mabel's cheerful mask slipped. Her eyes darkened, and her voice took on an otherworldly tone. "This diner exists to feed," she said, "and you're part of the menu." As they tried to leave once more, they realized their memories were starting to fade. Jake forgot his own name. Claire couldn't remember why they had stopped in the first place. The loops were erasing their identities, slowly absorbing them into the diner's twisted reality. Ethan pieced together the truth. The diner was a trap, feeding off the lives of travelers who stopped there. The only way to break free was to destroy it. Armed with a can of gasoline from their car, the group set fire to the building. Flames consumed the walls, and the screams of unseen entities echoed in the night. As the inferno raged, the friends staggered back to their car. The road ahead was clear, the neon sign gone. They drove in silence, their memories fragmented, unsure if they had truly escaped or if they were still trapped in the diner's grip. When they passed a roadside billboard an hour later, their blood ran cold. It was an ad for Mabel's Diner, open 24 hours. The slogan at the bottom read, "We'll be waiting for you,"